In my defense, it was genuinely the funniest thing I had ever seen. In his defense, he was the Alpha King, and the Alpha King's wolf is not meant to fall on its face in front of 300 people. But it did, and I laughed. I should say at once that I am not, as a rule, a brave woman. I am 23. I scrubbed down the hound runs at Greymore Keep for my place and my coin, and I have spent most of my life being very good at not being seen. A houndsmaid who keeps her head down keeps her bread. That was the whole of the wisdom my mother left me when she died, and until that morning I had followed it without a single lapse. I want it understood that I could have left. No collar held me at Greymore. I was hired, not owned, and a woman who can gentle a frightened hound can find work at any holding with a kennel and a coin to spare. I stayed because the runs were warm in winter and the houndmaster did not strike, and because I had nowhere I would rather be. That distinction will matter later. I stayed by my own choosing. Remember it. The king came home from the eastern border the morning it happened, and the whole keep turned out into the great hall to see it. I was meant to be at the runs. I had slipped to the back of the crowd, only to watch the hounds in the procession, which is the only part of any homecoming I have ever cared about. He came through the high doors with the cold still on him, and the hall went silent the way a wood goes silent before weather. I had heard the stories. Every holding from the sea to the mountains tells them. Sigurd of the Iron Reach, the strongest wolf alive, who had never lost a challenge and never, the song said, smiled at one. I expected him to be terrible. He was only tired, and trying not to show it, which is a different thing, though it took me months to learn the difference. And then his wolf came behind him. It was enormous, grey going to silver at the shoulders, taller than any beast I had tended, and it walked the length of that hall like the floor had been laid for its feet alone. 300 people held their breath. It was, I will admit, magnificent. It was also walking directly across the trailing edge of the king's own ceremonial cloak, which had pooled on the polished stone behind him. I saw it before it happened. I have spent my life watching the way animals place their feet, and I knew, 3 strides early, exactly what was coming. The great paw came down on the fur. The king took a step. The cloak pulled taut, and the most feared wolf in the 4 kingdoms went down in a slow, dignified, entirely unstoppable heap, sliding the last little way across the stone to come to rest against a column with all the majesty of a sack of turnips. The silence after was the loudest thing I have ever heard, and I, who had spent 23 years not being seen, laughed, one bright, helpless bark of it, before both my hands could clap over my mouth. It rang off the stone. It rang off every column. In a hall where no one had dared so much as cough, it was a bell. The wolf lifted its head and looked at me. Not at the 300 frozen nobles, not at its king, at me, at the back, with my hands over my mouth and my apron full of kennel straw. It held my eyes for a long, considering moment, and I would have sworn, then and ever after, that I had insulted it personally, and it intended to remember. Then the king turned and looked where his wolf was looking, and found me too. I have been afraid in my life. That was a new kind. I dropped into the lowest curtsy of my existence and stayed there, studying the floor, willing the stone to take me, and when I finally dared to rise, the procession had moved on, and the moment had closed over like water. I told myself it was nothing. A king has better things to remember than a houndsmaid's bad manners. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about nearly everything, that whole first season, and the wolf made very sure I knew it. It started with the stone. I found it the next morning sitting square in the middle of the run I had just swept. A smooth grey river stone the size of a hen's egg, dropped where I could not miss it. I thought a child had left it. I threw it over the wall. The morning after that, there were two, set neatly side by side in my left boot, where I put my foot down and yelped and hopped about the cold flags, swearing at the dark. I found 3 under my pillow at the week's end. By the time I understood it was the wolf, that the king's enormous beast was leaving rocks where I slept and worked and walked. With the patient malice of a creature that has decided to make a point, I had collected 11 of them, and I had begun, in the privacy of my own skull, to call the animal a great many things I would never have said aloud. Because it was the wolf. I caught it once, at the grey edge of dawn, depositing a fresh stone on my windowsill with the delicacy of a jeweller. It saw me see it. It did not run. It set the stone down with great precision, fixed me with one yellow eye, and walked away with its head high, leaving me standing in my shift in the cold with the absolute certainty that I had been told something and had failed to understand it. That was the question that would not leave me alone those first weeks. Not why a king would notice a houndsmaid. He had not. I was sure of that. But why his wolf had decided to wage a private, escalating, stone-by-stone war against the one person in the keep too lowly to defend herself. And why it kept doing it where the king could see. Because it always did it where the king could see. The king had taken to walking the kennels. The strongest wolf alive, who had a hall and a high seat and 100 more pressing things to do, had begun appearing at the hound runs in the early hours, with no reason any of us could name. And every time he came, his wolf would trot directly to wherever I happened to be, deposit a stone at my feet, and sit, vast and smug, to watch me find somewhere to put it. The first time it happened in front of him, I went the colour of a brick, and braced for him to have me whipped for whatever offence this was. He only watched. His jaw moved once, the way a man's does when he is biting down on something. "You have a great many of those," he said at last, looking at the stone and not at me. "Yes, my lord." I held very still. "Your wolf is generous." Something happened to his mouth, but he stopped before it finished. He turned and left without another word, and his wolf rose and followed him with one last look at me, the kind that says this is not over. I told the houndmaster I thought the beast hated me. The houndmaster, who had served 3 kings and feared none of them, looked at me for a long moment and then laughed until he had to sit down. He would not tell me why. That should have been the first clue. I had a great many first clues that season, and I misread every one of them. The second clue arrived with Lady Estrid. She came to Greymoor in the cold of the year with a retinue and a claim, and the claim was the king. Everyone knew it. She was a lord's daughter from the southern reaches, gold-haired and gracious in the way of women who have never once had to be anything else, and she had been raised, the whispers said, with the understanding that the Iron Reach would one day be hers to queen over. She walked the keep as though she already owned it. She walked the kennels exactly once. She found me there with the wolf's stones lined along my work shelf. I had stopped throwing them away by then. I am not entirely sure why. And she found the king's wolf lying across the threshold of the run where I was working, as it had taken to doing, blocking the door so thoroughly that I had to climb over it to leave. Lady Estrid looked at the wolf. She looked at the stones. She looked at me, in my straw and my apron, and I watched her do a sum in her head and arrive at an answer that did not please her. "You," she said. "You are the one the beast follows. The beast tolerates me, my lady. It is not the same." "No," she said softly, and smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "It is not." She left. 3 days later, I was summoned to the hall. I had never been in the hall when it was full. It is a different room with the court in it, the wolf throne at the high end, black iron worked into the shape of a beast at rest, and the king upon it, and below him the ranked warriors and the lords and the gold and fur press of everyone who had ever mattered, none of whom had ever once looked at me. Lady Estrid stood near the throne in a gown the colour of a winter sky. Beside the king's right hand stood Einar, his second, a broad, quiet man with a soldier's stillness, who I would come to trust more than almost anyone, though I did not know his name yet that day. Lady Estrid was speaking when I came in, and she was speaking about me. She did it beautifully. She did not accuse me of witchcraft, which would have been crude. She spoke instead, with great concern, of the unsettling influence the houndsmaid seemed to have over the king's own wolf, how unnatural it was, how the beast had been seen abandoning its king to attend a kennel girl, how a creature so bonded to the alpha's own self should not be permitted to fix itself upon someone so far beneath the dignity of the throne. It was a danger, she said. To the king, to the pack, the girl should be sent away, to another holding, far from here, where the beast could forget her and return its devotion to where it belonged. It was a masterwork. By the time she finished, half the court was nodding. I stood in the centre of that hall with 300 eyes upon me and felt the floor of my whole life tilt toward the door. I looked at the king. He was very still on his black throne, and his face gave away nothing at all, and I understood with a sick certainty that he was not going to argue. Why would he? She was right, in every way that the court could measure. I was a houndsmaid with a wolf's inexplicable favour and a noblewoman's clear displeasure, and a wise king cuts that knot before it costs him. "My lord," Lady Estrid said gently, "shall I make the arrangements?" And the king opened his mouth to answer. I have thought a great deal since about what he meant to say. I will never know, because at that moment his wolf, which had padded in unnoticed behind the throne, walked the length of the hall to where I stood, lay down across both my feet with a thump that shook the floor, and put its great head in my lap as if the whole question had already been settled by someone with far more sense than anyone present. The court made a sound it did not mean to make. Lady Estrid's face went white, then a delicate, furious pink. And the king, the strongest wolf alive, who had never lost a challenge, looked at his beast draped across a kennel girl in front of his entire court, and visibly understood that he was about to lose this one in the most public way imaginable. "It seems," he said, and his voice was perfectly level, which I would later learn was the most dangerous thing about him, that the matter is not as simple as my lady suggests. "The houndsmaid stays. We will not discuss it again." He rose, and he left, and his wolf got up off my feet and went after him, and I was left standing in the wreck of a hall full of people who now, every single one of them, knew exactly who I was. If you have ever been the only one laughing in a silent room, you will understand the next part. And before we go on, because I am told you can do this, and because the wolf would absolutely insist, if a story about a king who could not say what his own wolf knew has caught you the way it caught me that season, tell me so, subscribe, and stay. The part where I finally understood what the stones meant is the part I most want you to hear. Because I did not understand it yet. I thought I had been spared. I thought the king had simply decided that humiliating Lady Estrid was worth keeping a curiosity around. I went back to the runs, and I told myself the storm had passed. It had not passed. It had only changed shape. He came to the kennels the next dawn, alone, without his wolf for once, and he stood at the rail while I worked, and he did not pretend to have a reason. "You did not thank me," he said, "yesterday, for not sending you away." I straightened. "Would you like me to, my lord?" "No." He frowned at the hounds as though they had asked the question. "People thank me a great deal. It means nothing. I find I would rather you did not. Then I won't." I went back to the straw. I could feel him not leaving. "You could send me away still," I said to the straw, "if the court troubles you. I came here with nothing. I would leave the same way. I am not asking you to keep me. I do not know why I said it. It was the truth, and the truth is a dangerous habit in a houndsmaid. But I had spent my whole life being kept, or not kept, by other people's whims, and I was tired, and I wanted him to know that I, at least, was not afraid of the door. He was quiet for a long moment. When I looked up, he was watching me with an expression I had no name for then. "No," he said again, softly, "I don't think I will." He left. His wolf was waiting at the gate, and it had a stone in its mouth, and it dropped it at my feet on the way past, with the air of a creature whose work was being foolishly undone by a slow-witted master. I picked it up. I put it on the shelf with the others. There were 19 by then. I had started, without admitting it to myself, to keep them. The thing about a proud king is that his pride is the most honest thing about him. He cannot hide what he feels, because he is too busy hiding that he feels it at all, and the second project ruins the first. I learned to read him the way I read a nervous hound, by the things he did when he thought no one was watching, which were always kinder than the things he said when he knew they were. He left a book at the kennels, a real book, bound in leather, on the lineages and tempers of hunting hounds, set on the rail where I would find it as though it had wandered there alone. He never mentioned it. When I tried to return it, he looked at me as if I had offered him a live coal and told me he had no use for it, which was a lie, because his own mark was inside the cover. He learned the names of my hounds, all 11 of them. He would ask after the lame one, the old one, the bitch who had whelped badly, by name, gruffly, as if the information had been forced upon him against his will. And his wolf brought stones, and more stones, and I stopped being able to pretend it was a feud, because no feud in the history of the world has ever looked so much like someone trying, very hard and very badly, to give a gift. I found the answer in the library, where I had no business being. I had gone to return the book. I am stubborn. It is my worst quality. Slipping in at an hour when I thought the king would be in the hall. He was not in the hall. But the library was empty, and on the great table lay a ledger, open, and I am ashamed to say I read it, because my own name was written in it. It was a record, in the king's own hand, a tally, going back to the morning of the homecoming, of every stone, where it was left, how I had reacted, whether I had kept it, and beside the entries, in the margins, notes that were not about hounds at all. She keeps them now. She does not know why. Neither, his wolf, do I. And below that, dated the day Lady Estrid had stood in the hall, and nearly sent me to the far edge of the world. The wolf chose her in the first moment, when she laughed. I have known since the homecoming. I have said nothing, because I do not know how a man tells the truth when he has spent his whole life being feared for never needing to. She thinks the beast is angry with her. She thinks I tolerate her. I have let her think it, because the truth costs more than I have ever paid for anything. And I am, it turns out, a coward in exactly one direction. I stood in that empty library with the ledger in my hands and the whole season rearranging itself behind my eyes. The stones were not menace. In the old way, the oldest way, a wolf brings stones to the threshold of the one it means to den with. A thing I would have known if anyone had thought a kennel girl worth telling. The wolf had been proposing to me since the first morning. The grudge had never been a grudge. The king had not been tolerating me. He had been hiding behind his beast's blunt honesty, a choice he was too proud to make out loud, letting the whole keep believe his wolf bore me a feud, because that was easier than letting one person believe he might bear me anything else. It has not forgiven me, I had told the houndmaster, and neither has he. There had never been anything to forgive. There had only been a man who did not know how to be seen, and a wolf with no such trouble at all. I did not get to decide what to do with this, because that was the night Lady Estrid made her second move, and this one was meant to be final. I woke to the wolf screaming. I have no other word for it. I had tended dying animals all my life, and I had never heard a sound like it. The king's great silver wolf in the courtyard below my window, down on its side and convulsing, foam at its jaws, its legs working at nothing. I was down the stairs and across the cold flags in my ship before I had decided to move. It knew me. Even in that, it knew me. It turned its head toward me, and I caught the smell at once. Under the sickness, the sweet rot of crowsbane, still room poison in the meat scattered beside it. Someone had fed the king's wolf crowsbane in the dark, and arranged it where the houndsmaid the beast was known to follow would surely be blamed, and in the morning there would be a dead wolf and a poisoner with kennel straw in her hair, and no king in the world could keep her then. It was very nearly perfect. Lady Estrid had only made one error. She did not know that a houndsmaid knows crowsbane, and knows that it can be answered if you are fast enough and willing enough to pay for it. The king came out of the dark at a dead run with Einar behind him and half-shifted terror in his face. And I was already on my knees in the wolf's blood and foam, and I did the only thing there was to do. The bond was waking. I had felt it for days without naming it, a warmth at the edge of me that was not mine. Now it was a door thrown open onto winter. When I put my hands into the dying wolf's fur and reached for it, the way the old houndwives reach for a fading whelp, the cold of the poison came through it into me like a blade going in slow. I want to be clear that I chose it. There was a moment, there is always a moment, where I understood exactly what it would cost to hold the wolf in the world, to be the anchor it could not find for itself, and I understood that the cost would be mine. In my own bones, in the breath being crushed out of my own lungs by the weight of a death that was not meant for me. I looked at the king, who had gone utterly still, who could not save his own wolf, because the strongest wolf alive cannot fight a poison with his fists. And I bent my head and took the cold. Frost bloomed white across the backs of my hands. The air went out of me. The courtyard narrowed to a single point of unbearable winter, and a silver fur under my fingers, and the one thought I had room for, which was, not this one. You do not get this one. I held the wolf in the world by main stubbornness, and the bond's open door, and the simple refusal to let go. And somewhere a very long way off, I heard a man saying my name as if it were the only word he had ever learned. The wolf shuddered. The convulsing eased. Its breathing caught, and steadied, and slowed into something that was not dying. And the cold let me go all at once and dropped me. And the last thing I saw before the dark took me was the king on his knees in the courtyard with both arms around me and his wolf, holding all of us together, no part of him level anymore at all. I woke in a bed I did not recognize, which turned out to be his, with my hands wrapped in linen and aching as though I had held them in snow for a year. The wolf lay across the foot of it, very much alive, looking at me with an expression I finally understood. The king sat in a chair he had clearly not left, and when my eyes opened, something in his whole body came undone. You could have died, he said. You took it into yourself. You could have died, for a beast that has done nothing but put rocks in your boots. He proposed, I said. My voice came out a wreck. Repeatedly, it would have been rude to let him die a bachelor. The king made a sound that was half a laugh and half something breaking, and he put his face in his hands, the strongest wolf alive, undone in a chair by a houndsmaid in his own bed. And when he looked up, he had stopped hiding. I have known since the homecoming, he said. Since you laughed. Do you understand what it is to be feared your whole life, and then to hear someone laugh, not at me, at him, at the truth of him, the undignified, ridiculous truth, and not be afraid? You saw the thing under the crown, you laughed at it, and he chose you in that breath, and I have spent a season trying to find a way to tell you that did not require me to admit I had been chosen without my leave. He looked at his ruined hands, at mine. I am not good at being seen. I let you think it was a feud, because a feud asks nothing of me. I am sorry. You almost paid for my cowardice with your life. I knew. I told him. I read your ledger. It was a very poor hiding place for a secret, my lord, in the middle of your own library. He closed his eyes. Of course you did. You wrote that you were a coward in exactly one direction. I found, to my surprise, that my wrapped and aching hand had found his. I have decided to forgive you in exactly that one. What happened then I will keep mostly to myself, because some things are not for telling. But I will say that when he finally crossed the distance he had been holding open for a whole season, when the proudest man in 4 kingdoms set his pride down on the floor and kissed me, it was not the kiss that undid me. It was that he was no longer afraid of being watched doing it. Something that had been locked since long before I knew him came open, quietly, for good. I felt it go. Then the door, and the wolf's tail thumping the bed, and the whole impossible world rushing back in. The reckoning was not gentle, and I would not have it otherwise. Lady Estrid had been seen near the still room. The crow's bane was traced to her own woman. And when the king brought her before the full court the next day, he did not raise his voice once. He did not need to. He stood before the throne with me at his right hand, a houndsmaid, in borrowed finery, with bandaged hands. And he told the assembled lords of the Iron Reach that the woman who had tried to murder his wolf and frame the woman his wolf had chosen would be stripped of her name and sent from his lands at first light, and that any who had nodded along with her in his fall 3 weeks past might consider very carefully whether they wished to be remembered as having done so. No one did. Courts have short memories for the things they would rather not have said. Lady Estrid looked at me as they took her out. One last look, all her gold gone grey with rage, and I will tell you what I told her. Quietly, so only she could hear, because the court would have cheered and I did not want their cheering. I said, you were almost right. He did follow the beast to the lowest person in the room. You only mistook which way down was. The room was not silent for me, the second time. But she was, and that was enough. There was a cost to it all, as there is to everything worth having. A king who sets a houndsmaid at his right hand makes enemies of every lord with a daughter. And we spent that whole first year answering for it. Quiet defiances in council, alliances that frayed, a rival holding to the north that decided a king, so foolish in love, might be foolish elsewhere. And learned otherwise. The court did not simply accept me. I did not expect it to. I had spent my life unseen. I knew exactly how long it takes to be seen on purpose. I was patient. I had practice. But that is a tale for another night. A year on, I am writing this from the library, where I read his ledger, which is my library now too, though I still cannot quite say so without wanting to laugh. There is a bowl on the great table. It is full of riverstones, 19 the wolf gave me, and a great many more besides, because I have taken up the habit myself, and now it is the king who finds stones in unlikely places, in his boots and beneath his pillow, and once, memorably, in the middle of a war council, set square in front of him where he could not miss it. He never mentions them. His jaw does the thing it does. He keeps every one. The letter came in the spring, from the holding I was born in, from a woman who had known my mother, who had heard, the way the whole world had somehow heard, that the kennel girl from Greymore was Luna of the Iron Reach, and who wanted only to know if it was true. I wrote back that it was, and that my mother had been wrong about one thing, the only thing, and that I hoped wherever she was, she knew it. Keep your head down, she had told me. Keep your bread. But I had lifted my head once, in a silent hall, and laughed, and the strongest wolf alive had heard it. in the space of a breath, that he would spend the rest of his life leaving rocks at my door until I understood. I understand now. So tell me, did you see it coming? The moment the stones changed their meaning, or did it sneak up on you the way it snuck up on me? Leave it in the comments. I read them all, and so I am reliably informed. And if you would like to hear how a houndsmaid learnt to hold a court that did not want her, and how a proud king learned to be seen on purpose, then stay with me and subscribe, and I will tell you. There is more. There is always more when a wolf has decided. Wherever you are listening from tonight, pull your cloak close and mind the stone. You never know who is trying to tell you something.